Washington, here's the translation, that would be in hostile Middle Eastern countries, places where American troops would never be in the first place were it not for the insistent demands of non-geniuses like Max Boot and John Bolton. But never mind. No one in Washington is in mood for big picture questions right now, questions the obvious ones like, is Iran really the greatest threat we face, and who's actually benefiting from this, and why are we continuing to ignore the decline of our own country in favor of jumping into another quagmire from which there is no obvious exit? By the way, if we're still in Afghanistan 19 years later, what makes us think there's a quick way out of Iran? And so on. Nobody is thinking like that right now. Instead, chest beaters like Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska are making the usual warlike noises, the ones they always make. This is very simple, Ben Sasse wrote in a statement last night. General Soleimani is dead because he was an evil bastard who murdered Americans, which is essentially true. Soleimani was certainly a bad guy. But does that make killing him, quote, very simple? It does not. Nothing about life and certainly nothing about killing is ever very simple, and any politician who tells you otherwise is dumb or is lying. Yes, Soleimani was linked to the deaths of Americans. Nobody mourns his passing. But Mexico and China are also linked to the deaths of Americans. Each has flooded our country with narcotics from which tens of thousands of Americans die every single year. Not that anyone in power cares. So does that mean we get to bomb Oaxaca? Can we start assassinating generals in the People's Liberation Army? Maybe. Maybe Ben Sasse will call for that, too. He's a former consultant and a very tough character. But before we enter into a single new war, there's a criterion that ought to be met. Our leaders should explain to us how that conflict will make the United States richer and more secure. There are an awful lot of bad people in this world. We can't kill them all. It's not our job. Instead, our government exists to defend and promote the interests of American citizens, period. That's why we have a government. So has the killing of Soleimani done that? Maybe. No one in Washington has explained how. Instead, like Ben Sasse, they're telling us what an awful person he was. He clearly was. So, that's irrelevant. Meanwhile, it's pretty clear that things could start to move in the wrong direction pretty quickly. We're praying they don't, but they could. How do we know that? Because we've seen it before. We fought quite a number of wars around the Middle East in recent decades. We attacked Saddam Hussein twice, as you know. In the end, we killed him. We invaded and occupied Afghanistan. We toppled Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. We fought ISIS in Syria and then for some reason stuck around. We're still there. We joined humanitarian missions in Lebanon and Somalia. Our special forces have been quietly fighting in Yemen, Pakistan, Niger, who knows where else, many other places. In every single place, each of these conflicts has turned out to be longer and bloodier and more expensive than we were promised in the first place. The benefits? Often they've been non-existent. A lot of lectures about how the people we're killing deserve to die. Certainly they did. Hope that makes you feel better. What do the American people think about all of this? Not that anyone cares. Well, it's too soon, strictly speaking, to know the killing of Soleimani happened just last night. But just 5 months ago, after months of supposed Iranian provocation, Americans didn't seem to view Iran as a major concern, not even close. In a Gallup poll taken last August, just 18% of Americans said that they backed military force to shut down Iran's nuclear program. 78% said they preferred diplomacy and economic sanctions alone. So in a democracy, you'd think this would matter. But as is so often the case, the preferences of actual Americans don't enter the equation at all. They're immaterial. In 2016, Donald Trump ran on a promise of fewer foreign adventures, considering the ones we'd embarked upon didn't work very well. He vowed instead to focus on our problems here at home, which are growing. Against the odds, he won that election, probably because of that promise. But ever since, Washington, including some around the president, have been committed to ignoring the results of that election and its implications. Washington has wanted war with Iran for decades. They've been working toward it. They may have finally gotten it. Douglas McGregor is a retired U.S. Army colonel. He's an author of the fantastic book Margin of Victory, a frequent guest on the show.